In this section, we're going to be talking about the 15-minute increment worksheet. This is where we really begin to see how limited the capacity of time is and how we need to make sure that we are prioritizing what we need to do first. So this is what the worksheet looks like. It's called the 15-minute increment worksheet, and you will find it at the top of the Teachable page that you're on as one of the downloadable tools. The time management worksheet has a place for you to create how long you think something will take. So this is the amount of time you plan for something. And then as you go along the day, it has an actual time. So you'll be able to monitor how you'll use that time and how closely aligned you were with what you said, how much time you needed, and what you actually needed. As you go through this, just some basics of using this 15-minute increment. It starts at 5, and I just use 30 minutes here and 30 minutes here, because a lot of people get up at that point and they're not really planning on 15-minute increments. At 7 a.m., I start breaking this down into 1, 2, 3, 4 increments of 15 minutes each throughout the rest of the day until you get to the end of the workday. What this allows you to do is create really specific planned out days as you go along. So let's say that you are using this worksheet and you say that I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. As you're working on it the night before, you try to plan out your time. So you get up at 6 a.m. and let's say it takes you an hour to get ready, and that you plan to leave the house at 7 a.m. to take the kids to school. So you've got all this planned out. Here's when you plan to leave. This is when you plan to drop them off. Let's say you're trying to get there at 7:45 because school starts at 7:55, and you want to give a little bit of a 10-minute buffer. Using this assumption, by the time you drop off the kids and get through traffic, you now at 8:30 have planned to arrive at work. And that's how we see things moving along and how people use this worksheet just to plan. Just to give you a preview of what really happens, even before we move into some I guess, business examples of how you use this. In the evening, this might be how you plan your time or what you think it's going to be like. And even though this is what we plan, let's take a look at what actually happens. And this second side, this right side of the worksheet, will begin to give you a realistic idea of what happens in a real day, in a real time frame. So let's say that you plan to get up at 6:30, but you're exhausted, so you've hit the snooze button and you actually get up at 6:15. And you've planned an hour to get ready, so you're ready at 7:15, and you plan to walk out the door at 7:45. So, I'm sorry, you plan to walk out the door at 7, but what really happens is that you walk out the door at 7:15. And as you're walking out the door, one of your children says, "Oh, I left my homework on the kitchen counter." Now you're already running late. You're supposed to have left at 7. You're now actually leaving at 7:15, but you've got to go back in the house and get the homework, so you don't really leave until 7:20. All of a sudden now your stress has gone through the roof because you're thinking, if I don't get my children to school by 7:55, they will be late and it will cause them to have a tardy slip. They won't be on time. And it will be my fault. That's what we're saying in our own mind. So now you've left the school at 7:55. You've arrived at the office, let's say at 8:30. You're incredibly stressed because you were running late from the time you woke up. And even though you think you're going to arrive at work at 8:30 and being able to get started, what happens with this worksheet is it becomes apparent that we don't allow enough time. You do arrive in this assumption at 8:30, but now you have to park your car. You don't actually walk into the office until 8:45. As soon as you walk down, you sit down, and instead of getting to a project, you begin to look at email. And what that email does is, rather than allowing you to focus on what we talked about in the last segment of leading you toward high value activities, now this email runs you right into these rabbit trails, and they may be important, but they haven't been planned, they haven't been scheduled. And if you're not careful, you will find yourself working on emails and low value activities until you blink, and all of a sudden it's now 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2. If that sounds familiar, this 15-minute increment worksheet is going to be a tremendous help at giving you this idea of how much time you need to allow in your workday. Over the last few worksheets and video segments, we've looked at this to-do list. We're going to be shifting gears a bit here, but I do want to just go through these things one more time to make sure that we've explained how to use the to-do list going backward. The first thing on your to-do list is a date. You want to make sure that you date your to-do list so that you can take ownership of your day. Far too many of us begin to blame that we're too busy, that people put things upon us, but we can begin to believe that we have choices. As you create your to-do list in the evening, you're going to take that 7 minutes in the evening to literally brainstorm everything that you have, and you're going to put it on your worksheet. As we continue to go through this to-do list in the last segment, we remembered that there are 24 hours in the day, 1,440 minutes, that the 7-minute life is about taking 1% of your time, and that breaks down into 14 minutes a day, 7 minutes in the evening, and 7 minutes in the morning to think, to plan, to write everything down on a simple worksheet called the to-do list. And when we use this worksheet day after day, it begins to impact our brain because we're using repeatable processes and systems. Rather than grabbing the closest envelope, the closest scrap of paper, or the closest sticky note, we want to help you get in the habit of having one location that you write down everything as your to-do list. Using that to-do list, we then taught you in the last segment that you have to prioritize what you want to do. In the segment that we have, we said, okay, this is the first thing I need to do, the second thing, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. We prioritized those things in one location, and then we thought through which of these were high value activities and which of these were low value. Obviously, we still have to do high value and low value activities, but we need to plan which are more important. How do we get those done? And we looked at that one-page worksheet that had to do with reviewing our goals for the quarter or for the year and making sure that our to-do list is constantly moving us forward toward goal attainment. The last section that we talked about, so I'm going to go back and then finish up this page, is that we have a to-do list. In the evening, we use a repeatable process to write down everything that's in our mind. Some of the things are things we need to do. Some of the things we write down are simply things we don't want to forget to do. And some things may just be ideas or future ideas, but we're putting them in one location. We're making sure that some of these things on our to-do list are actually leading us forward toward our goals. So we've created the to-do list. Step 2 is to prioritize your tasks in order of importance. After you do that, you're kind of thinking through which of these are high value and which of these tasks are low value. You're also going to explore what the deadline is. And the final step of your to-do list is writing down how long do you think any activity will take. So on your number 1 task, you assume it'll take 15 minutes. The second task, you've estimated it'll take 2.5 hours. The third task, you think it'll take 20 minutes. So you're going through and you're doing all these things. Initially, it may seem like a lot. As you go through this over and over again, it will become very simple. Here are the 3 steps that we need to make sure that we're going through as we plan our day. First, we need to look at our goals. Now, that's a whole nother class. I think this is the missing link for a lot of people, is that they walk into the office, they sit down for that day, and they're really not sure what they should be working on. They don't know that end result of where they need to be either 90 days from today, or at the end of the week, or at the end of the year, or at the end of the 5 years, because they haven't sat down either with their team or their senior person, or if they're the senior person, you haven't sat down and set these goals. So we have to go back and be able to review the goal. That's the first part of time management. We talked about that in the last segment. The first step is having a goal that you're working toward. The second step is using a repeatable process. And today we're going to be introducing that 15-minute increment worksheet that will allow you to take the things that you've said you need to do, the things that you've prioritized in order of importance, 1, 2, 3. You've also estimated how long those things will take. This thing may take 5 minutes. This task may take 2.5 hours. This task may take 20 minutes. And you've gone through all of these things and you've done that. Obviously, creating that to-do list and prioritizing what you need to do and creating the length is a huge step forward. But until you're able to schedule these tasks, until you can schedule them in a place that you can actually get them done, they are really simply things you would like to do. It's when you schedule them and begin to mark them off, mark each task off your list, that everything will come into play. So I want you to take a look at this. I'm going to be switching from the original to-do list to give you an idea of something that actually happened in my life. This was a day in April of 2017. So if you're watching this in 2020, hopefully I've accomplished these things. Obviously, for me, I wanted to make sure my to-do list was in alignment with my goals. I had some things that had hard deadlines, and I also wanted to make sure that I had plenty of high value activities on my to-do list. Let's just take a look at what my to-do list actually looked like on this day and how I'm going to transfer these to-dos into a priority list. I'm going to mark down how long they take, and I'm actually going to move them over to the 15-minute increment worksheet. In the evening, I'm taking my 7 minutes in the evening, and I have this to-do list, and it's a simple one-time to-do list that I repeat over and over and over again. And during that 7 minutes in the evening, I'm writing things down. No order. I'm just getting them out of my mind onto a piece of paper. And I've said, I need to schedule time to film the final class for a video. I had taught a webinar, and I needed to make sure that I was going to be able to send the webinar replay out to the attendees. I had a meeting that I was planning for, and I just needed to plan the time and create the agenda. I was working on a project, and I needed to make sure the PowerPoint slides were completed. I had gotten some new glasses, really key. I had said I want to exercise. I was working on a new class on the science of procrastination, and I had said this was a good day to get that done. I had a lunch meeting with a friend of mine that's in human resources because I was looking to find out how to get some of the classes that I teach accredited for human resource continuing education. If you're watching this, you're watching it on teachable.com. It's a great training platform. And I had something that I needed to ask a question about. So I simply needed to send a support ticket. I was out of groceries. I was leaving for a meeting and needed to pick up the suit that I was traveling in. And I had a 6:30 evening event. It's a milestone review with some collaborators that I was putting on an event with. As I clear this off, the high value activities that were moving me toward my goal, the highest value, I needed to plan this meeting with a client. Very important. It was a very large client. This was an event that was coming up. I needed to get that done. It was very important. These two things were what I call pre-scripted time blocks. I had them scheduled on my calendar to have a 1-hour lunch with my friend Lori and to have a 6:30 event milestone meeting with some collaborators I was working on. So these are hard stops. They are actually events that I am going to be attending out of the office. As I wrote all these things down, I then prioritized them, which was step 2. I'll clean this off again. As I prioritized these pieces, this work on this PowerPoint slide was the number one thing that I needed to do, and I'd estimated it would take an hour and a half to complete that. The second thing that I needed to do was get out this webinar replay. I'd said I would do that. We had, I don't know, we've had thousands of people attend our webinars, but this was a specific one. I assumed it would take about 45 minutes. And you can see, I wanted to get the support ticket out, 10 minutes. This also was incredibly high value. I knew it would not take long. And then let's say I wanted to schedule time to finish the video. That would take 20 minutes in my assumption. And number 6 is I wanted to finish this. I assumed that would take 45 minutes. I had the 1-hour lunch. I had the evening. It looks, as you begin to go through these things, that as I added up everything on my to-do list, I was going to need 9 hours and 30 minutes to get those things done. And that looks fairly realistic. I have an 8-hour workday. I've scheduled things to do that were 9.5 hours to do. As you look at the to-do list, it then translates into this. As I begin, I need to know what time I'm going to get up. I need to know what time I'm going to go to work, because my first thing that I had scheduled is going to start at a specific time. As you schedule these things, you'll be able to see what they look like. It becomes a visual prompt for you, a reminder of how many things you can get done and when you're going to do them. This is what my day looked like. When you start your day, my guess is that the very first thing you're going to do is pull up your electronic calendar. And I do hope you're taking notes on this, because being able to write things down and come back and look at them is very important. On that day, I had scheduled to spend from 9 to 9:45 working on this webinar replay. I'd scheduled that for 45 minutes. I had scheduled to work on these PowerPoint slides for 1.5 hours. I knew I had a 1-hour lunch and an 1.5-hour milestone meeting. So let me blow these things up so you can see it a little better. And my guess is that this is what your smartphone, your electronic calendar looks like. When you come in, let me just take this back. When I came into the day, I saw 4 things on my calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4. I could clearly see that, and it looked like I had huge open slots to actually work on some of the things that I needed to start and finish. As I blow this up, this is where I think your to-do list and your time management, your project management is going to take huge strides forward. You cannot rely on an electronic calendar. These things were scheduled. I wanted to work from 9 a.m. until 9:45 to send the video replay out. I had planned to work from 10 to 11:30 on these PowerPoint slides. I had planned to have lunch with my friend attempting to get HR credit continuing education. As you look at your smartphone, I want you to realize that all of these things are nothing more than labels. Let me clean that off again. These placeholders that you've put on your calendar are nothing more than labels. You have said, I'm going to label this 45 minutes to accomplish this task. I've added a label, a name to it, and I've created a placeholder of these 45 minutes. Unfortunately, labels and placeholders hold very low amount of commitment. How many times have you put something, this time blocking on your calendar and you've said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and because they're only placeholders and you didn't have commitment or you had other interruptions, those things did not get done. Here's where the 15-minute increment worksheet comes in. And also I want to make sure that you know that not only did I have those things, I thought I had this humongous block of time. And then if you remember, I had that placeholder for this 1.5-hour meeting in the evening. The 15-minute increment worksheet that I had created in the 7 minutes in the evening before, I had created my to-do list the evening before, and I had pulled out the 15-minute increment worksheet, and I'd added my smartphone or electronic calendar to it. And the goal is to add everything that's on my to-do list and prioritized into this as well, but I'm going to show you how things really worked out. This was the first placeholder. From 9 to, let's say, 9:30 or 9:45, I was going to work on the webinar replay. From 10 to 11:30, I was going to work on the PowerPoint slides. 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I had planned this lunch meeting. This is pre-scripted time. And from 6:30 to 7:30, I'd planned this event milestone meeting. That was what I'd planned. Remember, on the left-hand side is what you plan to do, and on the right-hand side is what you actually accomplished. Left-hand side is what you plan to do. Right-hand side is what you actually accomplished. And this becomes a great tool for realizing how long things actually take. This was the 15-minute that I had expected to take. This is what really happened. These were my expectations. As I went through the day, I wrote down what actually happened. This is how my time was actually spent. So let me blow that up for you. I had planned for 30, 45 minutes to create this video replay. What really happened on this day is at 8 a.m., I looked at an email. I had a single or a couple of unexpected phone calls that led me down to additional tasks that needed to be completed. As I went through those tasks, I lost track of time, no kidding, and I have no idea what I worked on. This was a placeholder of something that I had planned to do. The reality was that my attention was pulled away primarily because I focused on email, which you've got to do at some point. I took a few phone calls, and those phone calls, whether they were important or not, because they were happening right then, they basically hijacked my day and sent me down, my guess is, low value activities. Rather than taking those unexpected phone calls, writing them down and telling whoever was calling that I would get back to them, and this is a huge problem as well, I decided that that phone call now in my mind became the most important thing that I had to do, and what I had planned to do did not happen. Now I already feel behind. The single thing that I'd said I would do didn't happen. Now I'm beginning to feel stress. Stress reduces my productivity and causes my brain to swirl even faster. Now it's 10 a.m. I'd created a placeholder from 10 to 11:30 a.m. So at 10 o'clock, I'm already stressed. I started working on the PowerPoint presentation. It was due the next day, and I had done quite a bit of it. It was due on the 13th, but during this time slot of an hour and a half that I had created the placeholder for, I did not complete the project. What I did is I spent the first 45 minutes planning. I had not thought about the fact that I couldn't just put it together. I actually had to plan step 1, step 2, step 3. So rather than actually putting it together, the first 45 minutes was spent planning. Now, at this point, I became frustrated. I was getting behind on my day. I knew that I could not get this done in an hour and a half, and I was going to have a lunch meeting out of the office. Rather than continuing to focus, I decided that I would leave early for lunch. Instead of getting there at 12 o'clock, there was drive time. I knew that. I left at 11:30 I left at 11:15 to get to 12 o'clock, and I decided, hey, if I left early, I could put gas in my car. Then, here's our lunch meeting. The lunch ran 45 minutes late, so I didn't even leave till here. I actually didn't even get back to the office in time, and so all of a sudden now my day is completely backed up, and all I've gotten done is some planning. I have not been able to actually take action, and I consider action when I start something on my list and completely finish it. It is only when we finish a task that we can mark it off. I'm going to leave that up there for just a second. How familiar does that sound to you? How familiar does that sound? You've planned some placeholders, you've put them down, you feel confident that you're committed to these things. Unfortunately, when you show up in the morning, an email or an unexpected phone call now becomes the most important thing on your to-do list. They may be high value or they may be low value, but my guess is that, 75% of the time, these things are going to be low value or something that doesn't have a deadline to complete today, and yet we react to those low value activities and we feel pressured to take care of them right then rather than scheduling a time to do them when we're not rushed. Here's what happened. I got into the office on time. This task didn't happen because I was going in an entirely different direction. I now am completely stressed. I feel like I've broken a promise to myself by not getting this done. But I went ahead and decided, you know, this was the number one thing that I needed to do. I put my head down, started working on this, and realized that there was no way I could complete this in an hour and a half, that it was actually a project that needed to be planned. What did I do? I spent 45 minutes of my time planning, but not actually finishing. At the end of that 45 minutes, I was now incredibly frustrated. So what did I do? Rather than trying to complete the project, I completely lost interest in it. I had a lunch meeting. I left early. I went and put gas in my car. The lunch ran late, and now my entire morning plans were not accomplished. That has to sound familiar. And that all happened by the time it was, I guess, 1:45 p.m. Now it's 1:45. I've done very little on my list. I feel everything creating pressure. And let me just go backwards. Why do I feel pressure? Because I know that I have important things to do that are going to take me 9 hours and 30 minutes. That included the lunch. It's going to include the evening. But you know, it included this 45, 30 minutes. It included this. And these two things have not gotten done. And this is now almost taken 2 hours. I still have this information to get done. And as you look at what I have, as you look at this, you'll see that now, by the time it is 1:45 or so, I still have almost 9 hours of work to complete, or let's say 8 hours. And I now have 3 hours and 30 minutes to get that 8 hours worth of work done. So we'll change this to 8 hours. I've done some of the tasks. So now I have 8 hours of tasks, the estimated amount of time to complete. And I now have a 3-hour block of time to complete that. I look at that, and I mean, this is one of my own. I mean, I plan these things too. We overestimate how many things we can get done, and we underestimate how long they're going to take. In this idea, we have not even included the fact in this 15-minute that we need to take breaks, that we need to eat lunch, that we're actually going to have additional email. We're going to have a lot of interruptions that are going to send us down into a different place. We haven't created time so that we can go and run errands. I had go get the groceries on my list, but that didn't happen. There are just so many things, you know, personal phone calls that you need to make, letters that you need to write, bills you need to pay, all of those things, social media even. I know we get, you know, pulled away, text messages. None of these things are included. And yet I still have 8 hours of work that I now only have 3 hours and 30 minutes to complete. Think that through. The 15-minute worksheet is one of those tools that becomes a great eye-opener regarding the limited amount of time the limited capacity of time that we actually have. The limited amount of time that we actually have. I'm going to clear that off one more time. If you remember everything that we've talked about, these 4 circles, you'll hear me repeat them throughout this class. 24 hours in a day, 1,440 minutes, 1% of your time, which is 14 minutes, 7 minutes in the evening, 7 minutes in the morning. You can see even the best laid plans, we still need to put buffer in there. But the part that is frightening to me is that I now have 8 hours of work left with 3 hours of time to do it. Every activity that I put into my 24 hours automatically knocks something else out. That's the key to getting so overwhelmed, is that if you have something else, like going to get gas, it's automatically going to knock something else out. And what normally gets knocked out is going to exercise, picking up your glasses, having time to spend time with your family. All I had left was 3 hours and 30 minutes to complete 8 hours of work. And some of it had a hard stop deadline that I had to complete. The PowerPoint slides, the meeting that I was going to have, those things had hard stops. So what happens? What happens is these things that have hard stops that have to be completed will begin to knock out things out of my life. They knock out primarily sleep. The things that have to be done by tomorrow, because I have overestimated how many things I can get done. If I've guaranteed people or made commitments to people that I will finish that in a specific day and turn it in, if I don't have enough time, something gets kicked out, and it is normally the amount of sleep I get. In wrapping up this section, we take our to-do list. We create that. We prioritize what has to be done. We write down how long each of these things will take. As we do that, remember the goals worksheet. We're going to go back and review our goals as we decide which activities we're going to do. We're going to make these assumptions, and we're going to create them on our 15-minute increment worksheet. What happens with these tasks is that all of a sudden they become what we call predictive. This is a predictive tool. In other words, what I mean is that as you get used to using your 15-minute increment worksheet, actually I'm going to go back to where I was. As you begin to use this 15-minute increment worksheet, you will follow over time the things that you've planned, that you've put in as labels or placeholders. And you will find out if that is reality, or if you need to schedule 45 minutes to take care of email and unexpected phone calls. You'll begin to recognize that when you have a project, you have to first plan to accomplish the project. When you have an hour-long lunch, obviously we need to add in drive time on the front and the end. When we look at this and we now begin to see that we have 3 hours and 30 minutes worth of work, we now have to begin to prune what we physically can't do. As we move into the next segment of this worksheet, of this, we'll now begin to narrow down these pieces to help you narrow down what are the 5 things that you can do before 11 o'clock. The 15-minute increment worksheet will become a reality check. You can plan your day, and then you'll actually write in what actually happened. The tool will become predictive. The biggest problem I have is that something I've put on my to-do list is not actually something I can do. Many of the things that we put on our to-do list are projects. They're going to take more than 20 minutes. And what we need to break things down into is what we call micro actions. A micro action is something we can start and completely finish within 20 minutes. I'm very excited about sharing with you the difference between a project and a micro action in the next segment, because we're going to have to start narrowing down what we can get done. It's all about planning. It's all about pruning. And now it's time to begin to finalize and pull all this together. I'll see you in the next segment.